I'm not a big fan of Brandon Staley. I think Brandon Staley uh, eventually will show us and will show us that some guys were meant to be coordinators and some guys are meant to be head coaches. He's got a long way to go before we can say that he's meant to be a head coach.
OutKick 360 rolls on. That's Armando Salguero from last week as we were previewing the Los Angeles Chargers matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We know how that game ended up at 31-30. And we say hello to Armando Salguero, OutKick.com's NFL writer.
Shot caller.
Well done there. And I can't wait to go ahead and go straight to Vegas with your next proclamation, Armando. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm going to go get in my car now and take a victory lap. A vroom, vroom. Brandon Staley does Brandon Staley. Guys, it's not hard to tell you who people are in the head coaching business. And when they are who we think they are, we see what happens in games like the Jaguars and obviously the Los Angeles Chargers. Terrible. Just awful.
Armando, based on Staley saying, when he was asked if he was outcoached by Peterson, he said, certainly wasn't outcoached in the first half. Based on a guy saying that, I doubt he's going to do this, but we just got done talking about this. I'd love it if Brandon Staley just came out before next season and said, you know what? I am on the hot seat. This is a huge year for me. We need to improve. We need to win big this year, and I'm confident in this team, and we're going to go out and do it. You have nothing to lose because you're going to get fired if you don't meet expectations anyways a year from now. So just saying it's not going to change anything. I would really respect a coach that came out and said that before a season.
Right. I'd also respect a coach who just blew a 27-point lead.
Yes.
And would put it on himself.
Yep.
Because he is a defensive coach. And yet his comments after that game were kind of looking towards what the offense didn't do in the second half. And lo and behold, they fired their offensive coordinator. What? Are you kidding me? Dude, your defense that was very good in the first half was very terrible in the second half. And yeah, you had 3 interceptions in the first half. You gave up 4 touchdown passes in the second half. So a little, staring into the mirror perhaps is called for. A little introspection. I'm not a fan. I'm just not a fan.
Armando Salguero with us on OutKick 360. Wink Martindale left Baltimore last year. Today we learned that Greg Roman is leaving as offensive coordinator this year. What do you make of Roman's departure, Armando, and how does it tie into Lamar Jackson and the negotiations moving forward?
Right. It's interesting what Harbaugh has done the last couple of years with his coordinators, because both of those guys, both of them, are very accomplished. They're outstanding. And we know that Martindale has never really been on the head coach hiring carousel, but that guy is amazing. And the New York Giants defense, which lacks cornerbacks that anyone is afraid of, the secondary is kind of mix and match. And yet here they are in the divisional round of the playoffs, and they're just great. They did a very good job against one Kirk Cousins the other day. Greg Roman was given a quarterback 3 years ago, that was not a very good quarterback. He was basically a run, type of quarterback that a lot of teams thought needed to be a wide receiver. And he turned him into an MVP candidate and a stud. And someone who is asking for a contract that is 100% guaranteed and worth over $250 million, $250 million is what Lamar Jackson wants. And the reason he can want that and no one stops is because Greg Roman helped to develop him. And the fact that now the Baltimore Ravens have decided, well, we've got the greatest run game scheme in the NFL, and the guy who schemed it up shouldn't be here. I don't understand that at all. Look, this year the Ravens, they struggled early in the year on defense. They gave up a lot of leads. They blew some games because of those leads. I would say to you, Wink Martindale's defense in Baltimore wouldn't have done that. So the same way they had growing pains this year after losing Martindale, they're going to have growing pains on offense next year after losing Roman.
Which one seed has the better chance of coming out a bit sluggish this weekend? Is it Philly or Kansas City?
Yeah, so, well, obviously both of them been off 14 days now when they play. Look, I just have very high regard and respect for Andy Reid. I also love the fact that he has a play in the playbook where the playmakers are in a circle and they go and they
that was
twirl
awesome.
around. It's like, how can you not love this dude? And their quarterback does acrobatic things with passes. I think I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe are more likely to stumble and bumble early on if they're going to do that this weekend, more likely than definitely the Kansas City Chiefs.
Let's flip that a little bit, and I'll ask you, with both number one seeds and their opponent, which of the two opponents is most likely to come out and play great and either win or give that number one seed a fight for their life in this game between the Giants and the Jags?
Well, the Giants already gave the Eagles kind of a fight the final game of the season, and the Giants weren't playing all of their players. The Giants were already, locked into making the playoffs. The Eagles were as well, but they played their starters. The Giants didn't early on, and it was a close game. And so one assumes that once the Giants get all their guys on there and in there, and we're going back to coaching, right? Brian Daboll, I think I shared this last week. He was the guy that I voted for Coach of the Year. I have a lot of respect for him. He's done more with less than most. And I just think that the Giants, what they did in Minnesota last week, what they've done all season long, which has been improbable and oftentimes surprising, you just, after a while, it's not a surprise that they show up and they play hard and they don't make mistakes and they're disciplined and they're hard to beat. So I'm going to expect that from the New York Giants.
Cincinnati invested quite a bit in the offensive line, Armando, and they improved greatly. The problem now is they're down 3 of their starters as they go to Buffalo this week, and they've got offensive line issues and questions. Buffalo does not have Von Miller, and how do you think that matchup goes? Who do you favor, given the fact that we've seen Joe Burrow win with a lot less in front of him?
So I was at the Bills versus Bengals game that was ultimately canceled. And at the start of that game, the Bengals were they were tearing up the Bills. It gets forgotten basically because of what happened next, which was Damar Hamlin collapse of a cardiac arrest. But up until that moment happened, there was a clear, better team in that game, and it was the Bengals. Having said that, as you bring up, the offensive line is not full go. It's not 2/3 full go, 2/5 full go. The Bengals with Joe Burrow, their bad offensive line last year, they were in the Super Bowl. So they're back to the same situation. Okay. Joe Burrow knows how to handle that situation. And I'm not saying it's optimal, because obviously it isn't. But I get the feeling that they feel like they can manage these issues. And with Jonah Williams, I'm not sure that it's permanent. So if they continue to advance, we'll see him again, is my understanding, no?
Yeah, I would think so. And Armando, it's interesting. You're there covering this story with Damar Hamlin. You were there the night it happened. You were there throughout the week. You were there for the Bills' next game. And we're all sort of learning as we go with all this. But unless I've missed it, I haven't heard any reports or any information coming from doctors or Damar Hamlin's camp or the Bills' camp on what exactly happened. We've heard about his status. We've heard about him back in the facility and everything else, but I don't know if anyone's asking the question anymore. We had doctors on speculating about what it could have been or probably was, but we haven't heard any update on what exactly happened that night to Damar Hamlin.
Well, it was asked, but doctors are not at liberty to divulge the medical information of their patients unless the patients explicitly allow them to do so. And Damar Hamlin, who is obviously allowed to divulge his medical information, hasn't spoken. And so until someone who has permission, or Hamlin himself or one of his family members decides to go there, we're kind of in a lurch. I know that there's a lot of theories out there of what it is. Let's just say this. Damar Hamlin is 24 years old, okay? And he had a physical at the combine. He's had all the players get physicals at the beginning of the year. They are all able to go to the trainers anytime that they have any sort of issue whatsoever. And this came out of the blue. That's not normal. Okay. As you guys probably know, I had a heart attack in 2020, but I'm not 24 years old and a prime of his life, super athletic, in shape athlete, as quite the opposite, right? Go ahead, say it. Quite the opposite.
You're saying it, Armando. I'm not going to say it for you. You're saying it. You're saying it.
So there were reasons that what happened to me happened, and bacon had a lot to do with that, and spaghetti had a lot to do with that, and looking at the treadmill and ignoring it for years on end had a lot to do with that. This guy is not that. So it's just stunning that it would happen to him. I think that's part of the story, obviously. But until he talks about it, I doubt anyone else will.
Should this game be on a neutral field? That's being discussed, given that we didn't see the matchup finish. They didn't midway through the first quarter. Was that an option for the league, or was it specifically to the AFC Championship game only?
It was specific to the AFC Championship game, and the Ravens and the Bengals had the Bengals lost the season finale to Baltimore, and then they would have both had the same record and had split their games. And not the same record, but the Bengals wouldn't have had a better record, but they had split their games. The thing is that the Bengals beat the Ravens, and so they swept the Ravens, and so that game was in Cincinnati. If you're asking me, do I think that this game this weekend should be on a neutral field? No. I mean, they both had the same number of games, and the Bills had the better record. So I don't see where I've not heard anything out of Cincinnati where they say, hey, this should be on a neutral field. And, I kind of don't really like neutral field. It's very collegey.
Yes. And I, for one, am not hoping that we see KC in Buffalo. I like the matchup, but I'd rather have a home field advantage in that AFC Championship game. And normally it doesn't go down to chalk, so more than likely we'll be talking about a home field advantage in the AFC title game. Let's flip. Let's discuss the game out west with San Francisco hosting Dallas. And all of a sudden, the weight is off of Mike McCarthy. Dak Prescott has the game of his season, one of the best of his career, and it came at a great time where the Cowboys now have some momentum. Meanwhile, speaking of momentum, that's exactly how to describe the San Francisco 49ers. What's the deciding factor in this game on Sunday?
It's going to be what it has been for the 49ers for weeks. Does Brock Purdy play like a second coming of Joe Montana or Tom Brady in 2020? Or at some point, do we see the reasons why he was a 7th-round draft pick, and not just a 7th-round draft pick, but the last guy selected in the entire draft? I've seen no evidence of why he went last in that draft. He goes through his progression super fast. He has the moxie. He has control of the huddle. He recognizes defenses pre-snap. This is a rookie. He's not supposed to do this. That's not allowed. And yet, the guy is doing it. His arm is good. Not great. He's not, Josh Allen or somebody like that. But it's good. And again, I have seen no evidence of why he was the Mr. Irrelevant. He hasn't had that moment. And I'm wondering, we're going to go one of two ways here. Either he's never going to have that moment, and we're going to go into next year and the following year, and he's going to be on a track of really good player who every once in a while has a setback, but not that often. Or, the carriage is going to turn into a pumpkin, and the mice are going to come out, and they're not horses anymore. And now the shoe doesn't fit. So it's going to happen at some point, or Brock Purdy is just the next Tom Brady.
Armando, what shoe is going to fit for Sean Payton with his next NFL team? What's going to happen with that?
Well, if ownership with the Los Angeles Chargers was major league, he would be the head coach of that team. But it's not, and so he won't. Let's see. Carolina has asked for permission to speak with him, correct?
Yes,
yep.
And that's apparently happening later this week, right? Or tomorrow.
Correct. Right. Which is later this week.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's on the books there. Arizona wants to speak with him, and they've all kind of spoken to him. They want a full-blown interview with him. Who's the other one? There's a third one, and I'm
Denver.
Denver.
Correct. To me, the Denver situation makes a lot of sense for him because he's got a quarterback that needs help now. He's got a quarterback who has lost his way, and Sean Payton knows how to fix quarterbacks and knows how to hide the flaws of his quarterbacks. And if the quarterback happens to be only like 6'1", and on the back end, he's been there and done that. And people forget that defense in Denver is playoff caliber. They're not good. They're championship good when they're healthy, even without Bradley Chubb. So to me, that seems like the best fit for him. Whether that happens or not. Oh, by the way, they're owned by the Walmart heirs who can afford to buy, to redo the Louisiana Purchase if they wanted to. If the United States ever wanted to, have a scar in the middle.
They're more liquid than Chargers ownership, is what we're saying also.
A little bit, yes. They can afford anything, including human beings. And Sean Payton is one of those that they can afford.
I'm intrigued, too, about the price tag that the Saints are going to require or ask for, because once he selects his team, that's when the negotiation goes down. And every team's different. So, like, Denver traded away their first-round picks this year and next year, right, for Russell Wilson, first and second round, I believe. Carolina is in the division, which is intriguing. Meanwhile, Houston, if he chooses to go to Houston, Houston has the picks, but he's not guaranteed necessarily the quarterback he wants because they picked 2 and not 1. I mean, would the Saints trade him within the division?
I believe that they would. I believe that they would. I believe that they would hold Carolina to a higher standard than they hold, say, Denver, who, by the way, does have a first-round pick because they got it from Miami for Bradley Chubb.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So they would trade that away. Gotcha. So that's the destination then because they can afford the price tag and his price tag.
But here's the thing. So that there's, as you guys know, there's a difference between asking price and selling price, right? The New Orleans asking price is a mid to late first round pick. I don't think that every team that is interested in Sean Payton will say, okay, there you go.
But it is.
I think that there's a negotiation involved. Yeah. And it could end up that it's not necessarily a first-round pick. Maybe it's a second and another second next year. Maybe it's a second and a third. There's always a negotiation that happens, and I get it. Sean Payton is the guy right now. He is the hot commodity, and he's probably worth a first-round pick.
Yeah,
but
yeah, and
sometimes.
And he's kind of doing the negotiation for them in a way, right? Because they're granting permission for him to speak, but he's going on Coward saying, yeah, the asking price is going to be a mid to late first round pick. And I spoke with Mickey Loomis about it. So I think up front, when he sits down with these teams, they kind of know what they're going to have to pay.
Sure. Until the person that's going to have to pull the trigger gets involved. And again, it makes sense if you're Sean Payton and you're going to Denver and you've got 1 first-round pick, are you eager to give that up for yourself to the other guy? No, you want to keep it if you can. And so he's going to allow, his new team, whoever that is, if indeed he goes somewhere, to try to talk that down a little bit, negotiate.
Which team do you ultimately think he goes to? You think he picks Denver?
I think that if he goes somewhere, that would be the place to go. You mentioned Houston. They have a lot of picks because they traded away a quarterback and they got 3 first-round picks for him. And so
there's also another short quarterback to work with that they could draft if they trade up 1 spot, and that's Bryce Young. I've thought about that with Houston being the next Drew Brees possibly for Sean Payton.
That's absolutely true. And, oh, by the way, I thought about this a little bit. Houston is sitting there at number 2. It would be painful for them to have to trade up to number 1 to get their guy. That would be a painful move. Thank you, Lovie Smith, because it ultimately could cost them another first-round pick to go up 1 spot. Why? Because some other team that values Bryce Young might do whatever they need to do to get to number 1. But my guess is that it's easier to go from 1 to 2 and still get like a second rounder or maybe a future first, like 2 years, 3 years down the road than it is, to go to like 10 or 12. And now you may not have that many guys on your board that you're happy picking.
Armando Salguero, read his work, OutKick.com, covering all things NFL. It's going to be a great weekend of football. The divisional round traditionally top to bottom, the most competitive of any NFL weekend. Armando, we're looking forward to it. Enjoy the games, and we'll catch up next week.
Thank you, gentlemen.
There he is, Armando Salguero, soothsayer on all things Brandon Staley.
He knows. He knows all.
He does.